It's a lovely day we've all been waiting for. It's just 3 minutes past 2 o'clock. But again, we're starting the show on a sad note. Well, just bringing you up to date. A Nigerian military aircraft has just crashed, en route to Niger State. But we're hoping that the military authorities should be able to give the nation an update on that, knowing full well it's not a commercial aircraft, it's a military aircraft, and so far that's all we can report at the moment. A Nigerian military aircraft has just crashed en route to Niger State from Abuja. But the big news today is the moment we've all been waiting for, and it's that happy moment for Nigerians who have been following the economic situation in the country. And today, I tell you, I'm excited for once. I think we're talking about the tables have turned. Once upon a time, yes, a colleague of mine, but as I say, a colleague is always a colleague. And today he's on the other side, and I'm still here asking the questions. Today, I'm excited to be joined by the Senior Special Assistant to President Muhammadu Buhari on Public Affairs, Ajuri Ngelale. Ajuri, good to have you on the program today.
I am just very humbled to be with you, Sulaiman. God bless you. Thank you for having me. And good afternoon to all of our listeners.
The good thing here is on the Discourse, we have a lot of Nigerians, especially Nigerians living in diaspora. They all, key into this program. And even before the program starts, a lot of people have started sending in questions, asking A, B, C. If you say we are out of recession, why is it that this price of A, B, C is still way up there? So the whole idea is for us to look at what exactly it is about. First, let's say congratulations to you and the president and the entire team for actually getting the country out of recession, even though a lot of Nigerians still don't understand what that means. Once upon a time, if you were here, you'll be asking the questions, what do you mean that you're out of recession? So that should be the very first point. Are we truly out of recession, Ajuri?
Thank you very much, Sulaiman. Let me just start by saying, in the introduction, you mentioned, of course, once a colleague, always a colleague. And let me say one of the great challenges that I currently have is really trying to bridge the gap that has existed, that has made Nigerians to feel that once anybody has entered the public service, they are against us. They're no longer on our side. And I really want to create a situation where, as much as possible, or contribute to a situation where we begin to see ourselves as one, because the truth of the matter is that the population without a governance structure cannot go where it wants to go, and a governance structure without a population and the support of that population cannot take the nation where it also wants to go. So we need each other. I think for us now, the challenge is making sure that we create a public dialogue in the country where we avoid the mistakes of the past, where successive administrations, military and civilian, have this tendency to issue these press releases. They throw information out to Nigerians and expect them to swallow it. And I think we really need to have a dialogue in the country where people fully understand that they are part of the national conversation and that they have a direct impact on policy formation and implementation. And that's really the task that is at hand in the Public Affairs Office under my watch. So let me start from the question you asked, which is about the recession. We are out of a recession. A recession, essentially, for the layman who is listening, the way it is, in effect, is where you have economic loss. So you have lost GDP, you are not growing, you are losing economic value and activity in terms of the sum of goods and services in the country, transactions, etc. So we have now come to a place of growth. However, we all recognize that that growth is very small at 0.11%. But it is growth nonetheless, and therefore we are out of a recession. But we are very clear about something. We do not expect Nigerians to be clapping for us, because the truth of the matter is that there's a lot of suffering in the land. People are hurting. And we know that during given the adverse impact of COVID-19 on the economy, people have lost jobs, some have even shut down their businesses, etc. we're certainly not going to be clapping for ourselves at this time. We recognize that it's a noteworthy, but we also recognize that we have a lot more work to do to give Nigerians a reason to celebrate. And once they're celebrating, we'll be able to celebrate at that point.
And the good thing is, let me quickly tell our listeners, well, they can actually get to send in more questions. If you're listening, you can join us via Twitter at Classic FM 973. Don't forget the hashtag, the Discourse. And of course, you can also send a text, 33973. And another beautiful thing is that you also get to see this pretty much later on our platforms here on Classic FM, because the management has ensured that this is also on Zoom, and it's been also recorded, which is one good thing because of the seriousness of this discussion. Ajuri, you know, coming out of recession is not the issue, as you rightly said. And in the last 7 years, the government has not been able to grow the economy beyond 2.7%. And so this is a suboptimal growth, since our population is growing at 3.5%. So the question is, perhaps we should start looking at the fiscal side of the government, the spending of the government, which has led to using about 85% of its revenues to service debt. So what is the government doing at the moment to cut its expenditure and that of the statutory allocations?
Yes, thank you very much, Sulaiman. So for us, it's very critical for us to understand the kind of the reality behind the numbers, right? So, you know, some Nigerians have asked me the question both on air and privately. When we were, you know, go back to kind of the glory days of $120 per barrel oil price, when we were making so much money, more than we've ever earned in the history of our nation, 2013. We were having, you know, 6 and 7% growth, et cetera, as a result of the massively high oil revenues that were coming in. And, you know, one of the things that I think people have taken note of over the last several years is the growth, while it is not that 7% that you're getting when you have high oil prices, because, you know, President Muhammadu Buhari has been consistently managing between, during COVID-19, the oil price crashed down to $10 per barrel. But he's been consistently managing. I think when he came in during the first recession in 2015, you had 2014, you had $30 per barrel, and we've consistently ranged around $40 and $50 per barrel. As a result of that, obviously, the kind of GDP growth that you were seeing during the oil boom years is not going to be reflected during a recession and all of that. So I think one of the major things that we've been focused on is making sure that people understand that whether you look at the numbers from NBS, whether you look at where our revenues are coming from, you recognize that we have moved away in some measure, not obviously, totally obviously, but in some measure, and we still have a lot more work to do, away from sheer oil and gas revenue. We've been moving into manufacturing, been moving very aggressively into agriculture. If you look at the growth numbers from that 2.8% over the last several years, you would find that most of the growth is coming from our investments in agriculture. You're seeing more in telecoms, banking, across the productive sectors of the economy. And for us, this is the future of the Nigerian economy, making sure that micro and small enterprises that are the engine rooms of economic growth across all the nations that we all admire, from the United States to the UK to France to Germany to China, etc. It's those small and medium scale enterprises that really drive those economies. And so for us, we have made unprecedented investments in the support of those MSMEs across the country over the last several years. Specifically speaking, from the Bank of Industry alone, during a time when we have had massive revenue shortfalls, we've still mobilized over 400 billion naira through the Bank of Industry to give zero interest and very low interest capital to MSMEs across the nation. We have seen the Central Bank of Nigeria give out well over 1 trillion naira worth of single-digit interest capital to MSMEs, as well as large-scale industry across the country over the last 2 years alone. Then I think if you look also at what we've done with informal business, this is a micro business that has not been formalized, has not been registered with the CAC. You find that, of course, with the social investment programs, we're able to provide zero interest loans to over 4 million petty traders across the country. Millions more farmers with the Anchor Borrowers Program. So we have made tremendous investments that have never been made in the history of this country. People often do forget that before 2015, if you are a small business operator and you want to go and find capital, you will go into GT Bank, Fidelity Bank, or any major deposit money bank in the country. They will tell you 25% interest. You will walk out. You will not even attempt to even sign paperwork because of how absolutely impossible it was to afford. So we have made those investments since then, and we're beginning to really see the growth of those key productive sectors of the economy. Yes, 2.8 is not where we want to go, but it is a step in the right direction because we understand that 2.8 mostly comprises of those productive sectors that we have invested massively in at a time when oil is down. Now, imagine with me, with this increased production we're seeing in the productive sectors, in manufacturing, etc., construction, and all of these other ones, with all of the projects being built across the country, rail, airports, seaports, roads, bridges, and all these things. Imagine what's going to happen now when oil now begins to tick up, as we're beginning to see now. People are projecting a super cycle by the end of this year into next year, potentially nearing $100 per barrel once again for the first time since 2014. So really, we're really looking to the future with great optimism.
Well, the good thing, I'm excited you just mentioned rail, and one beautiful thing is that the Minister of Transportation, His Excellency Rotimi Amechi, has also agreed to come on the program on the Discourse to talk pretty much more on rail transportation, water transportation, and the others. But looking at how we got out of recession, and there are some key things, and I'm hoping, because looking at the messages pouring in, I'm hoping, or rather the questions coming in, we don't have another scenario like we had when Laola Conde was on the program. We had, a flurry of questions coming in for him. The 2.3 trillion naira sustainability plan, I was almost going to start on that. That's huge. Anyway, tell us how it's been going, especially for the people, knowing full well that whatever plan the government has for the people, the power sector is actually a key component that must be in place. Otherwise, some of these things will just amount to nothing. So 2.3 trillion, how has it been so far?
Thank you very much, Sulaiman. So really for us, this is very critical. So last March, His Excellency President Muhammadu Buhari constituted the Economic Sustainability Committee chaired by His Excellency the Vice President Professor Yemi Osinbajo, and essentially that committee built the 2.3 trillion naira Economic Sustainability Plan, which is basically a massive stimulus to deal with ensuring that we did not enter the kind of steep recessions that many of our contemporaries across the African continent entered. I think one of the most underreported aspects of what Nigeria accomplished last year was the fact that you had during a recession, a situation where, if you look at South Africa, that many Africans admire as kind of the economic, bright light on the continent, they went into 50% loss, economic loss, 50% loss of economic activity, -50. We're talking about -3. Right? We were even projecting -6, and then it ended up being -3. And so when it was -3, people said, wow, it's only -3. Look at these other losses across the continent. The reason why was because from about June last year, we began implementing the 2.3 trillion naira economic stimulus. So for example, the power component you mentioned is very, very critical. That is the solar power plan, where we are hiring, we're employing 250,000 young Nigerians to manufacture, distribute, and most importantly, maintain 5 million solar home systems that will be deployed to rural Nigeria. So this is to empower the rural economy for rural farmers, rural schools, rural hospitals, rural MSMEs, and of course, rural homes. We talk a lot with our farmers. Obviously, over the last several years, President Muhammadu Buhari has placed so much focus on production in the agricultural sector. And one of the things they tell us is that, look, we do not have the capacity to refrigerate our yields. So what you end up having is they're producing these massive yields because of inadequate power supply. They cannot refrigerate. So before these yields, these products get to market, almost half have spoiled. Then you have the road challenges, et cetera, et cetera. So what we've done is we've said, look, we can kill multiple birds with one stone here. We can employ our young people, the young engineers, to work with these companies. All Nigerian companies, by the way, we're focused. The entire 2.3 trillion naira economic sustainability plan has a common ethos across all of its programs. Number one, we want to deal with Nigerian companies owned by Nigerians who will employ only indigenous Nigerian labor, who will use only indigenous Nigerian raw materials. So the things that we're using to produce these solar panels will be sourced locally. In the housing program where we're building, I'm sure we'll get into that, 300,000 houses across the nation. Everything from the sand to the limestone to the glass to the fabrication works, everything must be, to the cement, everything must be sourced locally. So that cuts across the entire program to maximize employment, create direct jobs, and also create indirect jobs by making sure that suppliers across all localities of the country are those who are supplying these construction works with their own supply. So the power plan is very clear. We deploy 5 million across all states of the Federation, all local government areas of the Federation. And another component of it, aside from the local content part of it, 100% local content, is that it is also going to be equitably distributed. So the 300,000 houses are going to be allocated in such a manner that every single state has the same number of houses. The same thing with the solar panels, with the solar home systems, et cetera, et cetera. So these are the critical elements that we put in place to ensure that every part of Nigeria benefits equally from this economic stimulus. And then we also looked out for minorities. His Excellency, the Vice President, who designed the plan, and His Excellency, Mr. President, also authorized to oversee the implementation of the plan. He essentially said, look, we have to ensure that the interests of our minorities are taken care of. So what he said is that 45% of the total works, patronage, if you will, within the entire 2.3 economic stimulus plan, trillion plan, should be given 45% to businesses owned by women and women beneficiaries. Minimum of 5% dedicated to businesses owned by physically disadvantaged persons. So you have a minimum of 50% to minorities. And of course, that is not the maximum. So really, we've tried to make sure that all the elements are covered. So when people say, wow, the Nigerian government said they were going to exit recession by the first quarter of March, I can tell you I was on TVC 3 months ago on a program, and I was with an economist, and he says, see this government spokesman, he knows sabi economic matter, no sabi at all. Look at this man, he thinks that by first quarter of next year, we're going to come from negative 3% to leave recession. You don't know economics. I was telling the man, I said, look, it's because you don't know what it is we are already doing. I am inside, I know what we are doing. So when I say that we're going to exit recession by first quarter next year, that is ending of March, I mean what I'm saying. And I even challenged the man that when it happens at end of March, play this tape back. And of course, here we are. So for us, we've come a long way, but we still have a long way to go. And we're not at a place now where we can be celebrating.
Well, absolutely. And again, I think you also talked about housing, which the Minister for Works and Housing, Babatunde Raji Fashola, he was also on the Discourse about 2 weeks ago. He said that much on housing, but I also wanted to expatiate more. But before that, tell us more about the survival fund. On Twitter, I see a lot of people saying that they were lucky, and how true is it that some people were getting this and the news didn't make front page as it would have?
My dear brother, this is the challenge we've been having with our brothers and sisters in the traditional media, is that some of the things that can really benefit the life of the average ordinary Nigerian in this country, they don't tend to be the things that we're discussing. We tend to discuss poverty index, insecurity in parts of the country, politics, party matters, and all these other things tend to take up all the airspace. But the ones that impact on the lives of people that they need to know about, we're not reporting them, I think, as effectively as we could. And that's where I think we can partner more closely with the traditional media moving forward. But let me say that the Survival Fund is something we're very excited about, particularly because it is very innovative, and it's really the first time any African government has ever attempted it. In effect, what you have is something that we're hoping to scale up in the years ahead. But we've started out with a 75 billion naira set of grants. This one no be loan, this one no be money you go pay back. Once you receive this money, is your money. The way it works is the Survival Fund is 75 billion naira worth of grants that were given to Nigerian only MSMEs. These are micro and small enterprises across the nation. Now, how it works is like similar to what you had with the Trader Money scheme and many of the other schemes. We leveraged on ICE information and communication technology to say, look, we have to ring-fence this program and make it fraud-proof. His Excellency, the Vice President, who really created the Survival Fund, said, look, what we're going to do is everything is going to be digitized. So the transfer of the funds will all be digital bank transfers into the accounts of the beneficiaries directly from source. And we also said we have to make sure that we're not just dealing with MSMEs as an abstract, right? Where you say, okay, the person who registered his or her company with CAC is the MSME. No, we said it is about the workers in the MSMEs. It is about the people who are working under that owner, who have families, who have children that are in school, are wanting to go to school, who have to put food on their table. We have to make sure that money gets into their hand. Because if we just assume that by giving money to the owner of MSME, you have helped the workers, then you may not be getting it right. So what we now did is we broke the Survival Fund down into about 5 component parts. The first component part launched last October, which is the Payroll Support Scheme. How it works, in effect, is the owner of the MSME will go to the website. All the programs under the Survival Fund can only be accessed through one way. It's not by knowing any big man. Knowing a big man will not help you, not by queuing in the sun. You go to the website, only the website, www.survivalfund.gov.ng. Once you go to that website, if you're interested in the payroll support scheme, which of course has already reached an advanced stage of implementation, what you do is you would apply, you register your MSME under that program. Then what we now do is you say, okay, I have 5 staff members in my company. I'm paying each of them 40,000 naira. It doesn't matter the sector. You can be in media, textiles, fashion, carpentry, plumbing, keke napep, transport, anything. And you say, I have 5 staff members making 40,000. This is who I need assistance to be paid every month for the next several months. So now what happens is we say, okay, very good. You have submitted your application. Now you have to provide verifiable documentation that will enable us to ensure that you're not trying to defraud the program, because we have genuine MSMEs and we don't want to be giving this resource to people who are not actually running enterprises and paying Nigerians to work. So what we now did was you provide your bank statement or your evidence that you've been paying this person this much money over a period of time. Once we have seen that verification, we've authenticated that, then of course we will now authorize direct payments into the BVN and accounts of the workers under your MSME. Now some owners of MSME say, you're supporting my workers, where's my support now? I'm also having a difficult time. Why aren't you people thinking of us? So what we now did is we said, okay, look, what we'll now do is we put together the MSME grant scheme, which is basically, in addition to the payroll support scheme, separate from the payroll support scheme, is 50,000 naira to the owners of the MSMEs. So you go to the website, you register under the MSME grant support scheme, and that's what happens. We'll pay digital payment to the owner, 50,000 naira, one-time operations grant. Then in addition to that, 2 major components came up very recently, which we're very excited about. They opened up on February 9th. One of them is called the, what we call the Formalization Support Scheme. His Excellency, the Vice President, understands clearly, having gone across rural communities around the country, that a lot of the businesses operating in our market squares across the country, on our roadsides, etc. These are individuals who may not have had the finance to be able to register their companies with the Corporate Affairs Commission. So what he now said is, look, we have to support informal business just as we're supporting formal business. So what we're now doing is with the Formalization Support Scheme, you go to that same survivalfund.gov.ng website. And what we'll do is we're going to pay 100% of the cost for registration of your company with the Corporate Affairs Commission. Not only that, we're going to walk you through the process from beginning to end to ensure that your company has been successfully formalized and registered, so that your company will now be in a position to benefit from future interventions in terms of 0 or low interest capital from the Bank of Industry or from the central bank or from the social investment programs and other programs that this administration has put in place. And then of course, you have obviously the National Youth Investment Fund, 75 billion, which we just put out in the 2021 budget as well under the Ministry of Youth Development. So we're going to be providing 0 interest capital, low interest capital to the MSMEs owned by Nigerians aged between 18 and 35 in the creative arts sector.
Let me chip in this here before we start looking at some of the questions here for you. You know, listening to you and also looking at what some experts have sent in, looking at the numbers, and from your conversation now, it seems to us that the non-oil sectors drove the growth. Is that right? The non-oil sectors.
Yeah, they have been growing. Yes, yes, absolutely.
So now let's talk more about agriculture. You know, the ordinary Nigerian out there who is actually trying to eke out a living. Livestock, with the exception of fishery. I know that the National Livestock Transformation Program, anchored by the National Economic Council, was in place. But what's the situation at the moment? Keeping in mind what farmers are going through with the mandates or criminal headers, and even the non-criminal headers whose cattle stray into the farmlands.
Thank you very much. A very important question. If you don't mind, Sulaiman, there's just something I wanted to say very quickly before I answer your question directly. Thank you very much. The last program on the survival fund, which I think is important for our people to understand so they can key into it, is the guaranteed offtake scheme. In effect, we have, as an administration, we've spent so much money on the issue of COVID-19 relief materials. So we're talking about distribution of sanitizers, face masks, food relief packages, things like rice, flour, spices, loaves of bread, pure water sachet, etc. So His Excellency, the Vice President, said, look, it does not make any sense for us as a government at the federal level to be paying out all this money to be importing any kind of materials that we're distributing to our people when we can be using that money to empower our local businesses and our people. So what we've now said is, look, 100% of that money must now be directed at Nigerian MSMEs and Nigerian businesses employing Nigerian employees. So under the guaranteed offtake scheme, you go to the website. If you are MSME anywhere in the country, there in Lagos as well, of course, if you have an MSME that is producing any of the COVID-19 relief materials I've mentioned, from food items to hand sanitizer, face masks, etc., go and register under the guaranteed offtake scheme. What will now happen is the federal government of Nigeria will take your company, treat your company as a contractor to the federal government, will directly patronize your company by bulk purchasing the items you produce to be used as relief material being distributed to our people across the country in the relief of COVID-19. So please just take note of that.
Quickly here, does the sachet water production fall into that?
It does, yes, it is there, yes.
Quite a number in communities across the country, and these are small business owners.
Absolutely, and it's important. It's not enough for us to have just some people in Lagos or some people in Abuja. Because of the way the program is spread out, we want pure water sachet, producers and spice, breads and rice producers and all these different people producing these materials. We want them across all states of the federation because we have a logistics chain across all of the states. So we want to make sure that we have an equitable allocation of those people producing each of these materials and items for onward distribution to our people in each of the states. So it's a nationwide program.
So, so the question, answer to the question, the sector, agricultural sector.
Yes, thank you very much. So you're right that the agricultural sector, obviously, there's no doubt that there's a very strong nexus between the agricultural sector and the security situation in the sub-region and in the country. One of the things I think we have not achieved in terms of our public analysis has been a sophistication, generally speaking, to appreciate that this is really not just a national problem. You know, when you hear the analysis on many TV stations and radio stations, it sounds like just a Nigerian problem. The people will bring ethnic issues into it, religious issues into it. They will say Fulani this, Fulani that, and all of that. The reality is, if you look at what is going on in Benin Republic, what is going on in Mali, what is going on in Chad, what is going on in Niger Republic, what is going on even in Togo and Ghana, you will hear their farmers also crying out about these Tuareg and sometimes Fulani, herdsmen who are, really wreaking havoc on farmlands across all of these countries. And it's because many of them have been co-opted by extremist terror organizations who basically have now got into a quid pro quo relationship with herders, basically saying, look, what we will do is your interest as a herder is economic. You want to be able to have access to lands, to be able to feed your cattle, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now, what we want is territory. So what we will do is, because the farmers are giving you quote unquote problem, we're going to arm you, right? And then you will help us to clear land so that we can take over that territory. We will make sure that your cattle and all of your various livestock are taken care of. That is what is going on at a sub-regional level with ISWAP and all of these organizations. But in the country, what you hear is Fulani versus Yoruba, Fulani versus Igbo. And we make everything political and very simplistic. And we don't really understand the depth of these issues. So I think that's one important thing to understand. Secondly, for us, what we've been focused on, other than, of course, securing the country and working very hard to limit the scope of the bandits and, of course, the terrorists, what we've also said is, look, we cannot continue to have a situation where we just take it for granted that only one part of this country is producing most of the food. We have to be very intentional about making sure that every part of this country produces food items, so that you're not in a situation where, if there's a crisis in the Niger Delta, now you don't have, just one part of your economy shut down in the same way that it would be with food production in the north, for example. So what we've said is, we have to create a situation where we have cultivatable lands across this country, where we are very intentionally, deliberately, and strategically cultivating high-value cash crops for international export. So what we've done is, as part of this 2.3 trillion naira economic sustainability plan, His Excellency the Vice President essentially called all of the state governors together under the National Economic Council and said, look, what we will do is that each of you, irrespective of political affiliation, now this one is about the country, all of you will produce a particular amount of land. Give me as much land as you can give me. What we will do in exchange is, we're going to employ millions of young Nigerians who are going to go across this land, and we're going to create a very intentional cross-generalization process where we can, really, pivot from the generation that has been farming in this country over the last 30, 40 years. That is the generation of President Muhammadu Buhari, the middle-aged, also the middle-aged class in the country, to now to the youths. How do we get the young people who are on Twitter and Facebook, who are interested in going into banking, telecoms, law, oil and gas? How do we get more of them interested in agriculture, understanding that this is a serious wealth-creating industry? That is what a major part of what we're doing. So the state governors have provided the land, and what we're now doing is we're employing these young people within the scope of the National Special Public Works Program. That's the 774,000 young people, 1,000 from every local government, to participate in a mass land clearing exercise. So we're taking land that is not cultivatable, and we are clearing it, making it cultivatable, so that those young people will now be mentored on those same lands to cultivate.
Sorry to cut you there, because I think it's a fine plan, as we bring the young people into all of this. But the thing here that should worry every Nigerian is going back to what you highlighted. Now we already know that the farmers' headers crisis isn't a national problem; it's a regional problem, for the continent. And now that we know that, what is the government doing to safeguard its own territory? With this beautiful idea you have for young Nigerians getting into farming, I wouldn't want to go into farming if I know that my government hasn't actually given me and my farmers or my assistants some kind of protection for going to our when we go into our farmland. So what are those things the government is doing at the moment to ensure that our farmers are safe?
Thank you very much. It's a very important question. Okay, so of course, there are a few things here. When we, generally the security conversation in the country tends to be that it's kind of a zero-sum game, right? So if you are totally secure, then you have scored 100%. But if you are insecure, then of course you have 0%. That's kind of how it's assessed generally in the public domain. So where we are is a place where we've said, look, we have to be able to assess security on a scale of where we were, where we are now, and where we want to get to. So we all recognize in the country that, in 2015, obviously, we all know what it was. I know as a reporter, when I was with AIT channels, you go out of your house in the morning in Abuja, and you're not sure whether you're coming back home in one piece. You're really not sure. Then you had bus parks, you had markets, you had the UN building, you had so many different targets, churches, etc.
You are seeing bombings, mass casualties in Kano. Mosques were blowing up in Kano almost every other weekend. At Kaduna, the same thing. They almost killed President Muhammadu Buhari in 2014 in Kaduna, if you recall. So we have come from a place where we are not seeing those attacks in many parts of the country anymore, as a result of the fact that we have been able to take back the territorial hold that Boko Haram and ISWAP had held onto entire local government areas in the country. But we also understand now that the crisis we have now has evolved into a kind of a hit and run counterinsurgency operation, whereby these individuals are going into places like Chad, into places like Cameroon, into places like Niger Republic, where they will find some kind of succor, some kind of resting place. They will gather themselves, plan, then they will conduct a hit and run somewhere in Maiduguri or Yobe, and then they will now run back. So what we have to do, like you rightly said, is we have to tackle this thing regionally. It is going to require a situation where if Nigeria gets it 100% right, and I am not saying that we have gotten it 100% right. Clearly, we have new security chiefs now. We have we've made adjustments to Operation Accord and many of the other operations in the country to adjust to the evolution of the threat we're facing. But even if we got it 100% right, if the Cameroonians and Chadians and Nigerians are not able to hold up their end, these people will continue to have a safe haven. So what the president has done when he was the chairman of ECOWAS is he mobilized everybody together and said, look, what we're doing has to be a regional approach. We have to create a scenario where we can all coordinate ourselves, both air, sea, and land, to come from a perimeter and close into the middle on these people until we have destroyed all of them. Because if we continue to do it based on each country's territorial integrity, each country's border, you will chase them to a border, you will decimate them up to a border, and then from that border, they will go and recover somewhere, get their financing from Yemen and Iraq and Syria and all of the other places they're being financed from, and continue to wreak havoc. So it must be regional. And that is why you're seeing the president conduct a lot of direct consultations with the Chadian president, Idris Deby, who just sent special envoy to the villa yesterday. There are so many collaborations taking place, and we're going to continue to deepen that.
Okay, another thing here, it's if you look at it critically, we're talking about the year of the pandemic. What the world is dealing with at the moment is something that you call some form of medical challenge in the form of epidemic. And how is the federal government planning to prevent eventualities from affecting the economy? Because we have seen what COVID did to Nigeria and the world, especially last year when we had the first lockdown.
Absolutely. So, we're pleased that over the last several weeks, we've been seeing a downtick in our COVID-19 casualties as we were seeing it from a few months ago. We're happy that Nigerians have really keyed into, in large part, of course, you still have your strands of imperfection across the country where some people may not be taking the protocol seriously, but on a large part, we think people they've done quite well to adhere to what we're trying to do in terms of our response. And we're seeing the results from that. I think moving forward for us, my brother, it's very, very critical that we have the direct participation of our people in our programs. I think one of the major challenges we have found, whether it's the Survival Fund or many of the other programs we put in place to deal with the economic ramification, is there's a deliberate attempt on the part of, I'm not going to name names here now, but on the part of political opposition in the country to try and muddy the waters as it relates to our programs with the economic sustainability plan. So what you will see is, you will see some e-warriors, people who operate on WhatsApp, Facebook, and Twitter and other social media sources. They will deliberately be disseminating fake websites where they will be directing innocent Nigerians to websites that will be asking them for money to apply, which is false. We have said there's only one website, but what they're doing is to intentionally raise suspicion and skepticism around federal social investment programs because they feel that if they do so, people will not want to key into it and that it will make government unpopular. That's their political calculation. And obviously, many of them feel that they lost the opportunity to do so when they had the power to do it. They didn't do it. So these are the challenges that many of us have.
Let me bring this in here, and it's from Tohir Mamadou. He wants you to tell us the current state of the Siemens power deal. Because according to him, he said we need to power up the nation if we must continue the growth trajectory that will lead us to development.
Thank you very much. A great question. So in the power sector, there are three main things that I think I should mention for our people. Number one is the issue of metering is a major one. We just launched in October last year the mass metering program, where His Excellency, Mr. President, put in place a fund through the Central Bank of Nigeria to procure 6 million meters in support of the distribution companies. Already, we have rolled out over 500,000 nationwide, and we are moving very aggressively toward that 6 million target over the next 12 to 18 months, so that everybody in the country who wants a meter can get one. That is the reason why that's critical, is because once every Nigerian has a meter, distribution companies, first of all, they will no longer be shortchanged with this estimated metering and all of that that has gone on over the last several years, which we have now rectified with the new service-based tariff that we brought last October. And we've now put a ceiling on the ability of distribution companies to be charging estimated bills. So now, that's number one. The second leg is we have been able to, with the Central Bank of Nigeria, His Excellency, Mr. President, has given approval for about 118 billion naira to be released for projects. There is some very critical transmission and distribution projects that have already been identified across the country. They have already been costed. They have already been oversighted. Now, what we're doing is he's approved the release of the money so that these projects can be done over the next 12 to 16 months. And they're going to be executed under the watch of of course, the Central Bank of Nigeria is supplying the funds on behalf of the distribution companies. Now, the implication, the reason why I'm mentioning this is once that 100 billion naira fund is put in place for these select projects across geopolitical zones that we have identified, it is going to add 2,000 megawatts, 2,000 megawatts to the transmission and distribution capacity of the country, so that the current 7,000 that we're generating, we are actually going to get it into the homes and businesses of Nigerians by 2022. So that is a very major component of what we're doing. Now, my brother asked about the Siemens deal. The Siemens deal, a government-to-government arrangement that His Excellency President Muhammadu Buhari signed into agreement with German Chancellor Angela Merkel, is a government-to-government transaction where the German Siemens company has already moved around the distribution infrastructure across the country. They have audited it. They know what is not needed where in terms of new construction, new power lines, new transformers, mini and mega, et cetera, across the country. On the basis of that, built a roadmap, and now they are going to provide the financing, a counterpart financing from a German export credit agency that we have already paid our counterpart fund on. Where we are right now is we're just about to do financial close in March, and then the installations begin by this summer, from June, July.
Did I hear you say the distribution, companies? What about the transmission? Because if you look at it, basically what the nation suffers, from all the time is a collapse of the national grid, and that's from the transmission company. It would seem as if the distribution companies, some of them have been able to invest in changing some equipment, obsolete equipment, and in training. But it looks like the TCN, which is still very much in the hand of the government, hasn't actually seen much of that kind of development.
It's said that the naughtiness is in the nuance. When you look at the distribution and the transmission, they're really interrelated. It's very difficult to say one is the problem rather than the other. Yes, it is true that the grid will collapse and people associate the grid naturally with the TCN. But the reasons for the grid collapse have to also do with dilapidation and underinvestment of distribution infrastructure in the country. So there's a marriage there in terms of cause and effect. So for us now, the 118 billion that I have mentioned deals primarily with the transmission challenges, the transmission infrastructure challenges, where we're going to be able to move it seamlessly on the grid, that additional 2,000 that has been stranded now for some time. Then the Siemens deals particularly with the distribution side of it. That is really where Siemens is going to be coming in with about 5,109 kilometers of new power lines across the country. So many transformers across the country. I'd have to get the precise numbers and come back to you, but we have a number of distribution substations that will be built under that plan.
Again, sorry, I'll need to do this more often because of time. Initially, I thought the 1 hour was just too long, but look at it, we have just less than 13 minutes to go, Ajuri. How soon are we likely to see that? Because everyone in Nigeria is interested in the power sector. So how soon are we likely to see Siemens commence this big development in the power sector?
Thank you very much. So like I said, we're going to do the financial close in March, and then we should see the installations on the ground from June. So we're talking about next month we close, installations June, July. People will begin to see the work on the ground. That's on the distribution side. On the transmission side, it will even come sooner, because the 118 billion has already been approved by the president for release from the central bank for these very critical projects to commence. And there's a 12-month timeline on that, on the transmission component of it. I think I need to say something very quickly. Some people have asked the question, why now? Why not in, say, 2015, 2016, 2017? Some people have asked that question. I really want people to understand something. You know, some people have asked the question about, you know, the money that they see. They say, well, we paid out over ₦1 trillion in the power sector over the last several years without result. It's important for everyone to understand that that ₦1 trillion was not an infrastructural upgrade program. That ₦1 trillion was in effect the equivalent of an electricity power sector subsidy. How it worked, and I want to just take a moment on this so that people really understand how this works. In 2013, when the federal government of Nigeria then conducted a very fraudulent, or should I say incompetent privatization exercise, what happened was you had a number of briefcase companies owned by cronies and friends of that administration. They basically came in and they filled their bank accounts with monies borrowed from international banks. So if you look at the bank ledger of that particular company, they will say, okay, I want to buy this power plant in this state. And I can prove to you with documents that I have $500 million in my company account. What they will not tell you is that that money was just borrowed for a moment to show that they have money in their account. What now happens is, based on that false information or deceitful information, they would now acquire the asset, pay back the facility that they took out to create that false impression. And then now they're sitting with an asset. So they have the Nigerian government by the jugular because they're the majority owner of the asset. Then what they will now do is they will say, we don't have any money to invest in the upgrade of the facility. That is basically what we have been seeing for the last number of years in the distribution subsector and some of the generation companies. Now, the reason—
And the government, sorry again, and the government has put in some kind of subsidy in that sector, isn't it?
Yes, so how it works, the reason why I took time to explain that is because we had a whole bunch of asset owners who did not legitimately have the capacity, both the financial wealth and also the technical competence to be able to upgrade the facilities they promised to upgrade at the great expense of Nigerians. So now that's number one. Now, how does the subsidy come into it? The Nigeria Bulk Electricity Trading Company, NBET, is basically a government institution under the Ministry of Finance that basically says, look, because the generation companies, they purchase gas from the gas producers to be able to power the grid. So they produce power with gas that they have purchased. So they are paying for the gas. Now what happens is, the way that it should work is that they produce the gas. The transmission company will wheel it to the distribution companies. The distribution companies will now receive the power that is generated from the GenCos. Now, on the basis of what they receive, they now pay, the distribution company is supposed to pay the generation company for power that they are distributing to the end user. But because of the failure of distribution companies to invest in the infrastructure, they don't have capacity to receive. So what now happens is the generation companies are generating this power at their own cost because they have to buy the gas and all of that and all the logistics. Then now what happens is NBET has to step in because the distribution companies cannot take the power and sell it. So now NBET has to pay for power that Nigerians are not even receiving, because if they do not, what will happen is the generation companies will, of course, run out of funds, and they will close down, and there will be no power in the country. The system will collapse. So that is what we have been funding.
You know, the thing here is that Nigerians can't wait to see June coming and see what the Siemens and Nigeria partnership would mean, since it's a country-to-country partnership. We have this here from Egwando Tone, and he says there's no doubt Nigeria is battling with the scourge of fake news. And he's asking, is the government considering daily media briefing, like what we have seen in the White House and UK? Acts like this will reduce the spread of fake news.
My brother, everybody is a victim of fake news. Everybody is a victim of fake news. One of the challenges we have had, I think as an administration, we probably will be able to do a better job of consulting moving forward. I think it's extremely important that when we talk about very sensitive issues like social media bill and some of the other potentially regulatory instruments that can be put in place to really check fake news, not in the interest of Nigerian government, not for censorship, but to actually protect the Nigerian citizen who is being deceived with all sorts of fake information. What we need to do is have a consultative process where all Nigerians are brought to the table to say, look, by town halls, by both virtual and physical, making sure that people understand what is at stake, what is their interest inside of the matter, how will it be done in a way that Nigerian citizens can be confident that the Nigerian government is not using it to take away their freedom of information and their freedom to express themselves. I think that consultative process has not happened the way that it should. I think it is something that can be done. And I think that's something that hopefully it will be done, because I believe it's in the interest of every Nigerian to uproot fake news. It doesn't serve anybody except for those very unscrupulous political actors who are using it to leverage on what they want to achieve in 2020.
Uche Noel Ego is asking, why has the president not visited any of the places where there's been massive kidnapping, farmers being massacred by militia headsmen, and even the recent ethnic clashes in Oyo and Ondo states? These incidents have a direct impact on our FDI and economy. And he goes on to say, this will also show empathy, sympathy, and also shore up confidence to the effect that victims are potential investors.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think one of the major, this has been a kind of a recurring theme. People, really discussing that issue of whether or not the president speaks enough and all of that. I think first of all, we have to understand the nature of President Muhammadu Buhari. This is a man of action. This is a man who, he's not a talker. He doesn't talk too much. I'm not even talking of media now or direct interface with the public. I'm talking about even on an interpersonal. He's not somebody he's not gregarious. He doesn't just talk anyhow. He's a man of action and principle. So what he has done, let's look at Kankara, for example. When the Kankara boys were abducted, as we all remember, there was so much pressure on the president should come out to speak. He should do this, he should do that. The president was in his office with the national security team, and they were working out a rescue that was going to surprise Nigerians. Nigerians didn't know what was going to happen, how it was going to happen. They thought that this was another repetition of Chibok. But Nigerians have seen the difference between what happened in Chibok and the denials from government, and now we still have people out there that have not been returned as a result of that failed response. If you look at what happened in Dapchi, you will know the difference. They came back, most of them. If you look at Kankara, it's because of the activity of the president. So I think most Nigerians are more concerned about the president getting it right and getting the right result than they are about how much he's on Twitter and Facebook.
That's a fluke, because that of Niger State hasn't actually yielded any result.
Well, I don't know if I would call it a fluke if the last several instances ended up the same way, because Kankara wasn't alone. Dapchi was also part of it. Remember how Dapchi went. So this is the thing. We are very much concerned about the most recent development. It's obviously something that we're taking very seriously. Already measures are being put in place, but the president is not somebody who is going to be coming out and talking anyhow and things are not getting done. He's somebody who is going to ensure that the right things are done and that those who, whether it is the Director of Defense Information, the Minister of Defense, and of course, even the president himself has spoken out, but maybe not in the presidential address that some people have called for. So I think the president is more focused on the action as opposed to the optics. I also think that there's no doubt that there is a hunger out there generally for people to see President Muhammadu Buhari as the leader of the country. There's no doubt about that. He's aware of that. And I believe that he's doing his best to marry both his personality, the conditions in the country, and what he thinks is best for the country with the desires of our people in that regard.
Before my question, let me take this. Someone has sent in a question saying that the president did promise then he was going to get the remaining Chibok girls then in 3 months. What's happening to the other Chibok girls?
No, I think the president clearly has worked very, very hard. I mean, we had gone, you're talking about a situation where in 2014, the incident occurred. And it was not at the end of 2014 either. And so you had all of that. You run through an election, you enter office May 2015, and the first thing you're working on is trying to get these girls back. And already you don't even necessarily know where everybody is, because you're talking about over a year now where people have been, gone into all sorts of different situations. Some people have even married, and so many things have happened, so much water under the bridge. So after that, we brought back, I think, 80 plus of them, and it's an ongoing process. The president has committed that he's going to do his very best to bring all of them back. If all have not returned, it is not for lack of effort. It is not for lack of action and diligence. It is because of the complexities on the ground. We're working very hard to try and make that a reality for our people.
Is there any reason why the president stopped the traditional, media monthly briefing?
Well, first of all, I think that, some people have asked the question why he's not going out, etc. Yeah, first of all, you take into account the fact that we are in the middle of a global pandemic. I don't know any country in the world where presidents are walking through markets or walking through town halls and all sorts of things like that. It's a different time. I think if we recognize that it's a different time, you also take into account the seniority of the president in terms of his age. You recognize that there's also need to take due diligence in terms of how some of these issues are dealt with. I think moving forward, when we engage with the press, I don't think there's any good reason why those engagements wouldn't take place. I think just very recently, he invited Arise TV before the pandemic into the villa, where they were they had a full program with him. So this is something that I think will be ongoing. And I expect after the pandemic, we'll begin to see more of these direct interactions.
Let me see if we can close on this, Ajuri, because it concerns me, concerns you and everyone, to the extent that we're paying sometimes for inefficiency and your thievery in the sector, talking about the power sector. If we go by what you have highlighted, that some people who were not qualified, who were dubious, that's the word, came into the sector, to put in money and take the money out, and what they are selling to us now is total, fraud. Why hasn't the government been able to arrest the situation and take those people who are not being honest with the country out of that business, which they knew nothing about?
Well, my dear brother, I think the major issue here is these asset owners, these people that you're referring to, had run through a process with the BPE. They put in place, because these were cronies of a former government. The government put in place what we call death bullets or death pills, if you want to call them that, in terms of regulatory stipulations. Which would basically mean that if for any reason some of these companies are taken over or revoked, or some of these other measures, you have massive financial payouts due to some of these unscrupulous individuals. And this was done in collaboration with the previous administration. So look, it's more complex than what meets the eye. But what I can tell you is what we have done as an administration is said, look, our focus is on the progress of the sector for Nigerians and the Nigerian economy. We're not going to move this economy forward until we get power right. So what we've done is said, look, the central bank and the Siemens, with the collaboration of the president, are now going to step in and bring the finance on behalf of the distribution companies to provide the infrastructure that they were supposed to provide. And that is the long-term solution. The distribution companies are happy with it. Government is satisfied with it. And Nigerians are going to finally get a good result out of it. What we're just doing is making the best out of a very terrible situation that we were dealt with. But we are determined to get it right.
Well, I'm hoping we should be able to do this again, since we have a timeline to work with, Ajuri. In the next couple of weeks from now, we should be back again to talk more about the Siemens and also look more on the power sector, because if these people are holding the country to ransom, they're not, if those kind of people do exist, then they are worse than the bandits holding the country to ransom. Then there must be some legal means to wrest it out of their hands and free up the people. It's a place for us to rest this. I must say thank you for making this an easy ride coming on the show. Ajuri Ngelale, Senior Special Assistant to President Muhammad Buhari on Public Affairs. I like to extract that from you. Is it a deal that we should do this again once we get to that timeline of the Siemens project with the federal government and few other things, because we need you to tell Nigerians truly what exactly is happening there.
My brother, you remain my senior colleague. You remain a hero to many of us who came up in the broadcast industry in this country. Anytime you call on me, I will be there for you. Anytime, any day. So yes, when that time comes and you call on me, I will definitely be here. And it's a humbling privilege to be with you always.
Honestly, I'm excited, and I like to thank you very much for being such nice company and for what you're doing for the country.
God bless you, my brother, and God bless all of our listeners.
Amen. Well, let's wrap today on the program here on the Discourse. Keep in mind that we'll keep following what exactly is happening in our polity. And again, the very sad news we started with, we're hoping to give you update in our bulletin as we go. The Nigerian military aircraft that crashed some hours ago on its way to Niger State. And we understand that it happened in the nation's capital, and Hadi Sirika, Nigeria's aviation minister, confirmed this. And he's explained that the aircraft King Air 350, which was on its way from Mina, Niger State, crash landed due to an engine failure. I'm Sulaiman Aledeh. Many thanks for listening.